At this finance meeting today, and everybody's in a nice state of euphoria. They're all out there trying to get the numbers right on that cake, which I need to have a talk to Amy about. Okay, so I'll formally open the meeting. The August finance meeting and the last scheduled finance meeting for this triennium. Welcome to everybody, including Mongai Maori. Jadine, I'll get the name right this time. Okay, so a call for apologies, and I have received apologies from Councillor Hamilton and partial apologies from Councillor Gallagher. Are there any other apologies?
Just for early departure around 12. It is for an government infrastructure webinar.
Thank you, Councillor Angela.
Not skiving.
Yeah, I got Jeff. Yeah.
For me on council related things, I'll be out of here at 12, so hopefully your quorum will be good. 12
o'clock, okay. And Deputy Mayor Jeff?
Yeah, hi, Chair Rob. I have to just step out at 11:15 for a while, but I will return.
Thank you. Any further apologies?
Only if it goes past 1. I've got something at 1 because I assumed you might be.
Okay.
Oh, I was going to say
pressure's
I assumed
on.
it might be, okay.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Paula. Okay. Okay, so do I have to move apologies? Yeah, I'll move the apologies be recorded. Thank you, Deputy Chair Maxine. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Confirmation of the agenda, and I'd just like to make a minor change because in the next item we've got some declarations of interest, and I would like to move C9, which is the facilities building renewals, move that item up to before C1 and public excluded. Deputy Chair Maxine will take over the chairing from item 10, and she'll continue in that chair beyond until we get to C1, because I'm one of those who wishes to express an interest in the next item on the agenda. So any other alterations to the agenda, Dave?
I did have a question of you relating to the agenda, Mr. Chair. I told you I had a couple ready for you.
Did you? I wasn't listening.
There are 5 substantial items in the public agenda and 11 in the public excluded.
Yep.
Seems to me that might be round the wrong way philosophically. Can I ask you as chair and maybe the deputy chair and general manager whether that was actually queried, the number of items that are now going into public excluded?
It did grow as since the pre-agenda meeting, but a number of these items reflect contracts that staff wish to get underway with the elections, and they would otherwise have been considered in PE had they fallen into other time periods than this particular one. But I am conscious of the fact that PE has grown.
So we could expect maybe a question to the general manager that the meetings in the future will have less because they've all been grouped, at least in public school, they've all been grouped into this one.
That's a promise, Dave, and I'm happy for you to hold me accountable.
Excellent. I'll come back in the public forum.
Okay. Any further questions on the agenda? Well, I'll move confirmation of the agenda with those particular changes. Thanks, Deputy Chair Maxine. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Declarations of interest. Yep. Councillor Mark. Do you want me to? I'll do mine first if you like. Yeah, look, I've got a couple of declarations of interest. One is item 10 and reflects my past association with PwC, and also C9. One of those building companies in C9 is a company that I still have a professional relationship and do work for.
So mine's C9 as well, and I don't have a financial interest in the companies themselves, but I did work very closely with them previously, where Downey and Livingston both produced factories for my family. So I feel conflicted. And I'm still very good friends with both families.
Okay, that's fine. In my case, I will exclude myself from the meeting for both the item 10 and the C9.
Yeah,
You'll be doing the same.
I'll just step away from it.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other declarations of interest?
That's my first declaration.
All right, that recorded. Let's.
Chair Rob, if I can just, what I should have said before is that even though these reports or papers are in public excluded, of course that is around completing commercial negotiations, and as soon as they're complete, they'll be released for public consumption.
Thank you. All right. Public forum. There are no people in public forum. Okay. Confirmation of the Finance Committee minutes. Item number 5. The minutes have been distributed. Are there any grammatical or information, factual errors in those minutes that any member wishes to raise? Okay, so I'll move the adoption of the confirmation of the minutes of the 17th of May. Have a seconder?
Ewan.
Thanks, Ewan. If there's no further discussion, no, let's just deal with the items arising. There's a number of staff actions there in item 6 and also in item 7. Can I just have an update from staff on the on what's happened to those action items that they've been responded to? The item 6, there were 4 items under item 6, which is Ian, your capital monitoring report. Okay, so all the items there have been actioned. An updated project timeline for the Rototuna Village Transport and Open Spaces project. Do you want to come back a little later in the meeting with?
Sorry, Councillor. Pastor, did you want me to respond directly to them now?
Well, do you want to leave it for your report?
I'll cover them in the report if you like.
Okay. And then Tracy, the development contributions trend, that will also be covered in your report?
I will just check with Blair because I thought he'd already done it offline separately, so we can just check with him.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so we have the minutes on the table for voting. Those in favour, by show of hands. Against? Carried. Sorry, Kesh,
Oh, no, I thought Martin was.
Oh, waving, okay. Okay, no, yeah. Now we move to the Chair's report, and I'll table that for any questions. I will speak to it, yes. I'll ask Maxine if she wishes to speak first, seeing her message is at the top of the report.
Thank you, Chair, and acknowledging that my report is at the top and thanking you for that generosity. I'd also like to thank you for the way you've led our Finance Committee. You've shown your years of experience as an auditor and a chartered accountant, and that's put us in a very good position to be able to take this council through into the next triennium, a triennium that you won't be taking a part in, and I'd like to acknowledge you and respect you in, as you go, that there's never been a meeting where you haven't asked financial questions and really interrogated the robustness of the analysis that's gone in behind all of the work of council, and that will leave a hole in our council, which I hope to be able to fill and see others fill as they come through in the upcoming election. So thank you for that, and go well to your retirement, where there'll be less than 2,000 pages meeting to read.
Of less pages to read.
Kia ora.
Thanks, Deputy Chair Maxine. I just want to speak to the rest of the report just very briefly. One, the current year, which I know that we'll all know that, and those of you who come back into the next term will know that there will be some financial challenges. And we're starting to get those, and we're starting to get messages out there as to how bad inflation might be or how good it might be in terms of the way that both the world and the government are turning around the after effects of COVID, and the need to stimulate but not overstimulate the economy so that it stays on track. So what's in the current year, I guess, is well known to everybody. The previous year, and I think that's some really good news, and Tracy will have the privilege and the smile on her face when she reports in terms of how the draft financial accounts, still subject to audit, up to the 30th of June, show that we were within $140,000 of the budget that was set, and we were looking at potentially being up to about $7 million different at different times during the year. So I think there's been a really good effort on account of elected members and particularly staff across the whole organisation to try as hard as possible to work to budget, and I think that's a really, really positive outcome for the new council coming in, despite perhaps the challenges that they've got with the budget. Also, to add to that were the comments made by Amanda Gray, and I'm going to ask for that clip, just that part of the clip, on our financial strategy. You'll be aware that Audit New Zealand have been asking councils for quite some years about having financial strategies, and then when they started rolling them out, some of them were up to 30 or 40 pages long, and Audit New Zealand was saying, no, we don't really want them that long, we want them as short as possible, but we also want them to set targets and guidelines for both staff and elected members to follow in terms of knowing what levers to pull and push to keep the budget on track. So I think it's worthy that we actually put Amanda's comments up and becomes part of the meeting. You can click on the report and get the link to the whole of her report, but we'll just show that part of it that relates to council financial strategies. Roll it.
This brings me to financial strategies. So for readers of the long-term plan to be able to really assess the prudence of council's financial management, the financial strategy must be clear about its goals and its trade-offs and be presented in a concise way. Although we've observed that there have been improvements, we're of the view that councils could do more in this regard. In our previous reports, we set councils the challenge of producing clear and concise financial strategies that were no longer than 5 pages. We found that the average length for this round of LTPs was 14 pages. And the graph that you can see on the slide shows that 33 councils have financial strategies that were 10 pages or fewer, which indicates that councils tried to present information in a clear and concise manner. In our view, Hamilton City Council, Tasman District Council and Greater Wellington Regional Council had effective financial strategies. Hamilton City Council's financial strategy, which was 7 pages long, was clear, concise and easy to read. The council highlights the unprecedented growth that the city is experiencing as a key challenge, among others, and its increased pressure that this has placed on the infrastructure and services. This provides a really good link between the council's infrastructure and financial strategies, And the council then goes on to explain how it's adapted the financial strategy to respond to those challenges. There's also a clear description of the risk of the growth assumptions changing and what implications that would have on the strategy. With Tasman District Council's financial strategy, which was 17 pages long, this was a really good example of telling the story to.
So look, that to be at the top of the list in terms of the presentation, and to have that from the Office of the Auditor General, which is unusual. You know, it's a bit like Inland Revenue investigating your business and giving you a certificate to say that you've paid all the right amount of taxes. Similarly, Audit New Zealand doesn't really go to this extent. So I think to pluck us out and put us at the top of the list is a good outcome, given I know the amount of work that went into during the last term to developing that financial strategy from staff and elected members, and the reaffirming of that financial strategy during this triennium. So I really hope the new council takes on board as it's one of its early tasks to review the financial strategy and agree as a group of elected members to a financial strategy that would give that outcome. And then finally, just before I ask Martin, who's got some questions, this is my last finance meeting and my the last meeting of the triennium, and my thanks to Deputy Chair Maxine for partnering the task with me, and to all staff who have helped me in terms of helping to manage this task, and as well as elected members who have continued to ask very, very good questions in this. And finally, to Mayor Paula, it's been a good 3 years for me working in this role, and I wish the city all the best, and the next council all the best as it sort of navigates a great future for the city. So that's my report. Councillor Martin, you have a question? No question.
I'm waiting for debate, Councillor Rob. I don't have any questions, I just have comment, but I'm...
Okay, well, let's... okay, if there are no questions, I will move that the Finance Committee... Is this debate or questions? Comment, no questions then, no questions? Okay, all right, so I will move the Finance Committee receives this report. Deputy Chair Maxine will second that. We now go to debate or comment. And I'll ask Councillor Martin, seeing I think he might have had his hand up first.
Yes, I understand, of course, you were Finance Chair under Julie Hardacre's administration as well, and I just want to, dare I say it, in all my years, I think you've been absolutely one of the most focused and best finance chairs that I've ever seen, and I think your skill set has been incredibly valuable to the council, and frankly, I think in terms of the broader community, to a degree, you've been underestimated in terms of the amazing contribution you've made to this council. We're going to have our farewell session, final council meeting, where obviously, you know, I and others will acknowledge your broader contribution to the community, Rob, but I just think you have been an incredible, fantastic chair of this committee. You have been our Minister of Finance, clearly on some but we have differed, but you have played that Minister of Finance and Chair of Finance role really effectively, and you know, as Maxton mentioned as well, the skill set that you have brought to this council, I think, has been very, very significant, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Martin. Mayor Paula.
Also want to lend my vote of thanks to you, Rob. You have been awesome to work with, and you've picked up this role, and the fact that you showed us that report where we were acknowledged as one of the better councils one of the top councils for the way that we deal with our financial strategy is testimony to the leadership of this committee. And I just really appreciate the way that you have given me nothing to worry about, because I knew we were in very experienced, safe hands with a really good team of staff behind us as well. So it was a good situation. On a personal level, Rob, I want to commend you for your integrity. You play the issue, not the person, so you always play the issue, and you've been straight up with what you think the financial risks are. And to your credit, you have laid some challenges at our feet for the next triennium. And those are legitimately things that we have to tackle, and we know we do. So I want to thank you for leaving that steer as well. And thank you for being a collaborative chairperson, taking Maxine on the journey with you in a very collegial way, and the way that you treat everyone that you deal with in your role with deep respect. I have the utmost respect for you and your integrity. And actually, when I heard you weren't running, I was like, oh, because we are going to have some really, I think everyone would agree with me, we've got some big shoes to fill here, Rob, in the next council. So we do have other skills around the table, but you have actually set a very high standard and bar, so thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Paula.
Look forward to celebrating with you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bunting, Councillor Mark.
Thanks, Chair Rob. Yes, I agree with Mayor Paula on that. He will be missed. You know, not many people know our secret code that we have, where, you know, when things get really tight, you give me that look and I text you the right answers. But, you know, I feel it's safe to bring that out now.
Or not the 9 p.m. phone calls.
That's right. Like, am I holding this up the right way sort of phone calls? No, but I mean, look, I know I have teased you for being Scrooge and called you Gorse Pockets on many occasions. But I actually say that lovingly, because you have such a vital role in the way we run things here. And yes, I agree. The comments about how you run a meeting is beautiful, and I've taken, you know, more lessons from you than you know, actually, in how you run a collegial meeting. But it's actually the out of meeting stuff that I've found you extremely valuable. Every time I bring a crazy community idea through, you'll notice you get seconded onto some working group, largely because if it gets through the Rob filter, it's going to be okay. And that's just not a tight monetary filter either. It's a really strong community lens. And secondly, you're a darn fine translator when it comes to some of these issues. So when it comes down to, for example, the Rototuna pools or the community funding, I've really appreciated your assistance and guidance through those. So you leave a bigger mark on this place than I think you know, and you do on me as well. So I'm looking forward to one day sitting down at your lush beach house and drinking some of your gin and talking rock and roll with you and laughing at those poor buggers back in council. All the best. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor O'Leary, Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just supporting everything that everybody has said. The financial acumen that you have brought has surpassed any other chair in the role of any form of finance committee in my time. And your fairness in chairing and your ability, as Councillor Bunting said, to I guess plain English, some really complicated things that as elected members we have to deal with and we have to read. It's been an interesting journey. You bring a level of trust to the role that makes it more comfortable to allow, as an elected member, to sit here and allow you to take the lead and allow you to guide decisions and decision making, and that's something that if I'm returned I will really miss. And you've made significant changes, particularly in this term, in how financial information comes through the reports, and that's a legacy that will set the new council up really well. And I know that the staff respect and admire you and will miss you as well, and miss your acumen. There's a whole lot more that I will say on the last council meeting about the terms that we've served together, and I'll do that when we celebrate your tenure. But thank you, Rob. You've been a great colleague and a great lead in this role.
Thanks, Angela. Councillor Dave.
Thanks, Rob. I certainly agree with all the points that have been made, and would like it to be known that there's absolutely no truth in the rumour that you were made chair to limit the amount of questions at meetings. Completely untrue, that sort of statement. And I noted with amusement in there that you thanked the Mayor for appointing you, and I thought, hang on, we actually elected you, she just nominated you. But there was an important point in that we all had confidence in you being in that position, not just the Mayor. Right. So I'd like that to be known. But I want to just mention a couple of points that haven't yet been mentioned, and that's one is these finance committees, much to my amazement, have actually been mostly fun. And I think a lot, who would have thought finance committee and fun being mentioned in the same sentence? So certainly there's been a lot of good humour in there, and it's down to you and the General Manager, who likes a good joke behind the scenes, so he tries to be a straight face most of the time. And look, the other advance that I think in this finance committee is the upscaling, if you like, of the non-financial performance results. I think that's a very important part. Maybe finance committee isn't the right word going forward for the name of the committee, but it's very important that they are seen alongside the financial parameters, and this committee's done that, and I want to thank you for your part in that.
Thanks, Dave. Councillor Mark Donovan.
Yeah, just to reiterate what everyone else has said, I know I've only been here a year, but in my commercial world, the sales and marketing team always used to fear the accounting and finance team, because they...
As they should.
Yeah, and you know, we would always knock on their door knowing that debits only ever equal credits. So, look, I think you bring a financial expertise to this council, which is I've admired in the short time that I've been here. So it's been awesome working with you, and I'll look forward to a gin at your place as well, especially if Bunty's shouting. So. I thought you were... Oh, it's his? Oh, okay, all right. Either way, well done, mate. Good on you.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Kesh.
Wanted to add to the same sentiment, Councillor Rob, for your guidance and support, especially coming through as a new councillor. I was talking to Max just this morning about our first ever finance meeting, and taking many hours to understand the reports and how to actually read the reports. And I remember you taking your time explaining it to us. So thank you for that. And I've learned that from you to always stick by what you believe in and stand up for what you believe in, and I respect you for that, and I thank you for that. Yeah, you're a gentle but firm councillor, and I really admire that. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Kesh. Thank you for that. Ewan.
Thank you, Chair. It's always good when an accountant's described as firm but fair. Look, I'd like to just comment briefly that I think over the few terms that we've served together, in the initial terms we may not have got on particularly well. But in this particular term, I've found you delightful and engaging and very helpful, and I've really appreciated that. I've particularly appreciated your commercial input on the endowment fund. You were pivotal in getting all of us in the same place to re-engage the endowment fund, and I think that will be an ongoing legacy. So I really appreciate that. And I join the chorus of everybody saying the level of credibility you bring to your role. And you have, well, whoever takes on the role going forward has big shoes to fill, but well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Sarah.
Chair Rob, I also just wanted to join in saying thank you. I've really enjoyed working with you over the last 3 years, and you've always been accessible when I've called to get your thoughts. You've been an incredible sounding board and someone who I've had very high regard for in terms of your views and opinions on things, except I have occasionally questioned your ability to count when it comes to the number of bikes going over Claudelands Bridge. But thank you.
Thanks for that, Sarah. I'll be looking at them with both eyes going forward. Mangai Jadine.
So, e tautoko nā ngā mihi kua mihia, so I just want to support everything that everyone said, and despite the comments about bikes on Hawlands Bridge, I just want to say you make accountants proud. Kia ora.
Thank you, thank you. Deputy Mayor Jeff.
Yeah, look, thanks, Chair Rob. I don't want to be left out here, but I do want to add my voice as well. I've enjoyed your chairing, and you and I have had the odd moment over the last couple of terms, but there haven't been any code of conduct things flying for a while, and I've always enjoyed your ability to vote, to speak on something and vote on something, you know, without fear or favour. And yeah, so huge respect to you, and thanks for the great job you've done.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, so we now thank you for those very, very nice comments. I might want to stay now. Yeah, I know.
I know it's unusual. It's really only a political debate, but this is your last finance meeting. Do you think it would be okay if anybody from staff wanted to say anything?
Entirely over to them, yeah.
I just thought you
Thank
might.
you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Certainly, I've been here nearly 7 years, and I've had 2 different finance chairs, and you've been my favourite, Rob. I've really appreciated Rob's leadership in the Finance Committee because it makes our job as staff a lot easier to bring topics to the table. We've always been able to have full and frank conversations. Councillor Rob and Councillor Maxine have caught up with Tracy and I on a regular basis, and Councillor Rob always takes a deep interest in terms of the governance role and what his responsibilities are as chair, and I really respect that and concur in terms of Councillor Rob's, Chair Rob's integrity. It's been outstanding, and it's been, I believe, a wonderful skill and leadership to have for this committee. So thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
I'd just like to speak on behalf of my group and offer our thanks to your support and your assistance that you've given us over your terms. A lot of people might not be aware that early on in Councillor Pascoe's career on council, he was very close to H3. He assisted us a lot with our reporting and a bit of early monitoring that we needed to be doing, but most importantly, he was our ambassador. So he, Councillor Rob, always attended major event activities for us. He would represent us with the national and international sporting bodies, was up to Auckland whenever we needed him to make an appearance as an ambassador for us, and I would like to acknowledge that and thank you on behalf of my group and on behalf of myself personally for your support and your direct engagement with us. We have, some of you are aware, we have a awards program that we operate within H3, and from time to time it gets it's a program that gets extended beyond just the H3 staff that we do every year for excellence, and so I would like to present you on behalf of H3 with our Hero Award.
Thank you. Thank you. I should have had that early in my term on council, shouldn't I?
Rob, can I just say on behalf of the whole organisation, it's been a pleasure to work with you. I've always found you a person who will come and talk to you about any matters, your questions before the meetings, and then actually work that through. I think you've provided immense value to a whole bunch of interesting situations that we've been in, but some of our commercial and semi-commercial deals with organisations, and I think Council's been quite innovative at times, and I think your background has really helped with that. But I'll have to say that staff respect and they like you, and I think that's a real testament to the way that you've gone about your role as a governor, and we really appreciate that, and you'll be sorely missed by staff. And as Sean said, you know, you've gone beyond your portfolio at times as well, which we've really appreciated. You've been a great advocate for the North East as well, and you know, work with a bunch of people up there. And I think one of your key skills is that you're a really good listener, and you display active listening, and then you actually work with people to get results. So I just want to thank you on behalf of all the staff for that. We've really appreciated that. Thanks.
Thanks, Lance. Okay, let's move this before we before a tear comes to my eye. Yeah, thanks for that, Paula. Okay, so we now have a vote on receiving the report. Those in favour, by a show of hands. Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
All right, now let's move on to the real hard work of this meeting, which is Ian's report, the Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning, elected members. Going to present the 12-month financial result for the capital program for the 2021 year, which is the first year completion of our current LTP. I will endeavour, while I'll take the report as being read, I will go through and highlight some of the issues I would like to highlight to the elected members, and equally I'll try and cover, give an update on some of from the actions from the last committee. And I do have a question that Councillor Pascoe presented yesterday in respect to one of the elements in there, so I'll cover that as well. The total spend for the financial year was $252 million, and that reflects the continuing increase in investment that this city is making in renewing our assets, improving our levels of service and meeting the demands of a growing city. And while we should and we do focus on the dollars as we finish the year, I think it's important that we reflect on what was actually delivered physically. And to that end, we have included within the report today in attachment 1 a look back document, which is this document here. FYI, I've left a pile of them up the front with Narelle, so if you wanted a hard copy as opposed to the printed PDF you would receive with your report, they're available as well. I think this is a great overview of some of the key deliverables that the city has seen over the last 12 months through the capital program. And I will remind councillors that this was all done while we were dealing with a COVID lockdown, the subsequent economic impacts around inflation and supply chain constraints. So I think that's an outstanding result. I will note too that if you refer to the bar graph that's on page 3 of the document, just inside here, you'll see that really does paint the picture of the significant increase that HCC has seen in the last 5 or 6 years in the capital program. You know, it wasn't that long ago we were delivering a program around the 86 million mark, and here we are 6 years later delivering a program at the 250 million mark. And through the LTP, that program's just going to continue at that rate over the next number of years. So that's that just reflects that investment. And finally, in terms of the report, I do want to, if I'm permitted, I would like to just make a publicly acknowledge Anna Marie Harris from our PMO office and Aaron Lehman from our comms team who put all the good hard work into delivering this document. So just well done to them, and it was appreciated. The other issue, the next issue we'll move on to is deferrals. They always get a little bit of attention in this meeting. The final value of deferrals coming out of the last financial year was 146 million. So we started reporting that number back in the March report. We said we were indicating it would be a range between 135, 145. So yeah, we did come out at the higher end. But again, the great thing with that was, and I say good thing and a good was, we were able to accommodate that and acknowledge that as we moved through the 22-23 annual plan. So we were able to take that into account, and that meant we were able to put in front of you a more deliverable capital program going forward. And just to remind elected members that the capital program for the current financial year, as published in the annual plan, was for 325 million of deliverable. You'll find in attachment 3 and 4 a full list of those deferrals for the year, which you can go through, and I can take questions later if you have any. There are a couple of budget changes that we are putting forward in this report for your approval. The one I would like to focus on, though, is you will note that there's a significant change in the capital budgets as we acknowledge the change in accounting for software as a service. That's been raised at previous meetings. The accounting standard no longer allows us to recognise it as a capital expenditure item, and as a result it's been removed from the capital program. along budget and actual and transferred across onto the operating statement. So Tracy will maybe talk about that a little bit later during her item. But that was not insignificant at about 4.6 million. There's a full list of all the budget changes as usual in attachment 2, and that's the landscape attachment. And the feature there, of course, is it takes you from the opening LTP budget of 328, sorry, right through to the final budgeted position for the year, which was 251, and it shows you all the movements and the various categories of changes through each of the finance committees that we had throughout the year. So that's there as well. I'll move on to work in progress. The final work in progress for the year sits at 552.8 million. That is a significant sum, but then, as we've just talked a little bit earlier, we have had a significant capital program last year and the year before, so that's reasonable. The focus always is on the WIP that we define as outstanding. In other words, this is capital work that is now in service, but we haven't yet capitalised. And that's where all the attention goes from a staffing point of view in terms of getting the capitalisation done. We have reached the end of the year and we still have an 85 million value sitting there. So while we have, and we continue to make a depreciation allowance on the value of that work in progress, ideally that number should be 0. And we will continue to work on that. While we have had quite a significant reduction over the last 6 months as staff have continued to focus on this, that number is still a little bit higher than we would want. And I think it would be fair to say to councillors that while they haven't said directly, we would expect Audit New Zealand will want to and will make a comment on that balance when they present the management report based on the 21-22 annual report. Again, it'll be around, I imagine, around the process of capitalisation as opposed to financial impact, given that we have actually allowed the financial impact through the ledgers, through the journals. We're reporting, continue to report 10 projects as being monitored for having risks attached, either being cost or timing, and they're listed in the report through paragraphs 46 and 58. I will note one of the questions from the last committee was a timeline around the Rotorua Village project. And I'll just get Councillor, apologies. I'll just get General Manager Alan Crisp to respond to that.
Promotion.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond to that. Yeah, look, the question I think was about the Rotorua Village Works and progress report. So, councillors, we've got 2 projects there. One is the library contract managed by community. So that project is going really well. Completion by March 23, ready for fit out, training opening about May 2023. So that's going really well. The second contract we've got there is the SHIC contract for the public realm space. So that contract is going really well and due for completion also in May 2023. So that's producing the parking spaces, the public realm spaces, the North City upgrade and Turakina Rise. We do have a problem which we have reported to this committee, and the problem is the connection of Turakina Rise to Bournebrook Road. We ran into a problem with the national policy statement on fresh water, which popped up right at the 11th hour in relation to a drain that's in the way of connecting to the 2 roads. The plan forever has been to culvert this drain. The 11th hour, the NPS fresh water policy put some hurdles in the way. Last time I spoke to you, we had a good argument, we thought, for the culverting, and I was optimistic that we would resolve that in a meeting that week I was having with Regional Council. Sadly, my optimism was misjudged. We met with Regional Council and they didn't buy into our arguments, but we have mapped out another pathway which we're working on. So we will get there, it's just taking a little bit longer. So in the meantime, that it's a separable portion that's sitting in the roading public realm contract, but we can't initiate it until we deal with this national policy statement on freshwater matter. So, yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the answer at the moment. We are still working on it. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, that's your report, Ian.
I just cover final points.
Yep.
Rob. Look, and we continue to report one portfolio risk, which we monitor, which is acknowledging that the current economic conditions around cost escalation to continue to exist, and staff continually to monitor that and to consider the inflationary impacts on the budget. And I'll just remind elected members that through the last annual plan, you decided to increase the capital program for those projects deemed to have a risk element from the standard 3% we had in the LTP up to 7% to acknowledge that. So we will continue to monitor that and report back any developments or any issues in that space. The last thing I wanted was Councillor Pascoe or Councillor Rob raised a question off the report, off the back end of looking at the Tracy's report around the useful lives around the transportation assets with a tone to look towards the impact on roading maintenance and what you saw as being a increase in the number of potholes around the city and around the country. I've seen it in mainstream media as well. Just wanted to say that the range in the table on page 36 in Tracy's report mentions a range between 12 and 140. I just wanted a bit of clarity there. That range is actually a little bit broader than that. It's actually 5 years to 150. We'll get that updated. That includes all the asset componentry that goes into the asset class transportation. And so some of the shortest life assets within a roading network actually is the top seal or the surface, whether it be chip seal or asphalt, which is obviously quite important when in a potholing environment. So that's as short as 5 years, and that's all determined based on road volume, road usage and design life. So I just wanted to be aware, and if you're interested, both the annual plan, annual report, we do actually publish a far more detailed breakdown of the asset componentry under the transportation areas to give you a feel for what the assets are in there. And just as a couple of examples, surface can be anything from a 5-year life to a 20-year life, whereas curb and channels can run from anything from 20 to 60 years. And then you get your pavement base course running from anything from 50 up to that 140-year period. So I don't know if that's answered your question, Councillor Rob, but it's just a little bit more background sitting behind those useful life numbers.
Yeah, it was just an observation that if we are hard and fast with those years, an observation that some of our streets, some of our roading appears to be deteriorating, whether that's faster than what the estimated life is, or whether we are behind with our renewals projects. It could be one or the other, or a combination of both. But it appears to be a national issue too, in terms of some of the media coverage, and that was the media coverage on Waka Kotahi roads. It was really just that comment as to whether it's appropriate that we look at. And we've got adverse weather events that might be helping deteriorate some of the road surfaces too. And the 5 years might need to come back to 3 or, That was really the reason for the question.
That's good, and of course I'm an accountant, not an engineer, but the other thing I will just maybe remind elected members that certainly in the renewal space around the roading network, that work's undertaken by the alliance arrangement we have with Downers. And you'll find if you actually look at the numbers, there's very low levels of deferrals in that space. Those programs of work tend to be get done every year because of the importance, and that's one of the benefits of working in an alliance situation about that, the work does get done. So take some confidence out of that.
Okay, I'll jump the queue here with my question, so let's go back to the list now. Mayor Paula.
Thank you. Some of your questions, in terms of the capital deferrals and the risks to project, because you answered capital deferrals. The risks to the project, and when I look through them, and Chris, sorry, the sun's up there, so I'll look this way. When you describe some of them, I just want to understand how much work we're doing around the bow wave of effect from those cost escalations, because we'll be going into another annual plan round, we'll be going into another long-term plan round, and when do we get to understand any adjustments we need to make, because we all see the world out there, and of course Rob and Ewan drove that conversation about inflation, but we also are aware of labour and cost, which everyone I hear from says is a problem. So when I see that, and I think 10 significant projects, and I see how big they are and how expensive those projects are, it does make alarm bells go off, and I just want to understand, are we allowing for that in our future forecasting? Because this is just what we have done so far, but we have to look forward, right?
Yeah. Probably a couple of items in there that I can respond to. One, if I go to deferrals first. So look, our deferrals this year are higher than we would like. But if we look at a portfolio level, I maintain that we're still delivering our major projects. We've got a lot of our projects are contracted. A few more big ones last week were tendered. You've got a couple today and on your agenda to let. So we are delivering, and there's some of the deferrals are cash flow. It's not delivering the projects, cash flow issues. But in saying that, can I just confirm that there were some really good discussions towards the end of the year just gone with elected members. We're really focused now on deferrals, and we're looking to fundamentally change the way that we report them up to council. So there's a bit more spotlight on this. We also had a good session yesterday as ELT, as a business. We've introduced some new processes to put a bit more focus on deferral and delivery of our program. I think if you break it down, the significant issues we've got moving forward is probably two from my point of view. One is delivering our renewals and compliance program. Council has given us 3 years to deliver that. Year one, we're building momentum, but we didn't quite spend our money in renewals and compliance, but we're really focused in the 3 years to spend that effectively. So that's one of our strong areas of focus, is renewals and compliance. The second big challenge for us is transport improvements. So I think we've spent a year or two getting a really good strategic foundation for some of our work in terms of Eastern Pathways, biking and micromobility, and we're into delivery time now. So we are really focused on delivering that and setting up a structure with a mindset of we are going to deliver transport. So those are the two big issues. I think the second point you picked up, Mayor Paula, was about cost escalations. So we did have some really good discussions on that in terms of the annual plan. We put some allowances in for some of our contracts, particularly Peacocks, and across some of the other higher risk projects. We've let you've got a big project that we're asking you to award today. That market prices come in within our estimates and our budgeting. So we're not seeing at the moment a lot of things go outside the budgets that we've got. And it's still very much a significant risk. I think the last quarter escalation was 7.1% or something, so it's still running extremely high. So it's still a significant risk, but I think at this point in time, from my perspective, we're managing that fairly well. So happy to answer any more questions. Or
Just following up, that's good that we're managing it at our end. I guess I remain a little nervous, but in terms of some of the contractors that we use, or even our alliance with Downers, how are they faring, or when do we check in with them to make sure we're not concerned about their financial viability and their ability to deliver? Because
so part of our procurement process of strengthened up financial viability is a check before we move into work with contractors. So there are checks and balances we have there. I think some two interesting observations that a couple of our biggest projects that we've tendered, we've had good competition for, so 3 players, which is really good, really healthy. We're starting I'm starting to see just down at the lower end in the 1 million, 2 million, we're starting to get single tenders for some of those. So that's a bit of a worrying sign. The reason for that is everybody is just so busy. I think absenteeism from the supply chain has been a really big productivity issue as well for most people. So it's still a challenging time at the moment. But yes, we generally check in with all of our contractors and we do those financial checks.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Sarah.
The first question I had, Ian, thanks for your report, was just around the work in progress stuff. I guess it's come to us quite a few times that we're working on better processes and things, but are we kind of making a dent in, can you give an update on that?
Oh, look, yeah, we're definitely making a dent, Councillor Sarah. We recently appointed, if you're familiar with Morgan Kay, who was our internal auditor. She was just appointed into a capital financial analyst role within the development group, with the key focus of that role to focus and fixate on not just dealing with the backlog of the work in progress balances, but also at the same time to look at the processes that were sitting behind that, working with the project managers to have a far more streamlined approach to that. There was meetings as recently as this week between council staff and the Alliance around the capitalisation of the transportation assets. Paul Gower's leading work in his space around that. So, you know, I'm telling you with hand on heart that the organisation really has put a significant effort and focus into this work in progress space. And I think with the people like Morgan coming into play, and that greater focus with the staff outside, I think you'll find that over the next 6 to 12 months, you're going to see that number's going to come right down into very well acceptable and manageable levels.
And what would you, thank you Ian, and I was, just for some context, what would you say would be an acceptable level going forward?
My personal view is it should be zero at all times. I mean, just so you're aware though, we've got to be realistic. When an asset is finished and it's due for capitalisation, we give ourselves a 3-month window between that and that to get the capitalisation done, because without sounding like we're putting a man on the moon or a person on the moon, it can be quite a complex process, understanding the asset componentry and flowing the data through the asset management systems to get the right outcome. For the organisation, for the ongoing asset management. So, look, I would expect, depending on the context of our capital program, you know, maybe something in the maybe the 10 to 15 million mark on a monthly basis. I would find that acceptable, but I would like to see that was as low as possible on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that update. And my other question might be for General Manager for Infrastructure, but it was just around the Ward Street upgrade. So it seems fairly clear that we won't be progressing that work in this LTP period when it was scheduled. I note that very recently Waka Kotahi worked with us to move some of the Eastern Pathways co-funding and funding over to the biking and micromobility work. And we've had some discussion around this before, but have we had any discussions yet with them about moving their co-funding for this so that we can still utilise it in the same general area of work?
Through the chair, there have been conversations. Excuse my voice. I'm just coming off a week of being unwell. That there have been conversations within staff, but we just understanding where elected members would like us to go before we start having those formal conversations with Waka Kotahi and what that looks like. So that can now start to, we can now do that based on the annual plan that was delivered, and then ensuring that we maximise the subsidy that Waka Kotahi has already approved for us in that space and where that could go. So there may be some initial conversations about that, but nothing more detailed that I can confirm today.
Okay, so you're just needing more guidance from elected members at this stage?
Yes, that would be, I believe, appropriate to understand where that funding would go and to be confirmed to be spent.
Okay, and that funding is in the biking and walking category, is my understanding.
That was I'm sorry, I don't have that detail, but it is part of the Ward Street upgrade, which was waiting on the development of properties within the street.
Okay. In terms of providing guidance, what would be the best way to do that prior to winding up? So you've got something before, I guess, the big vacuum of elections and induction.
I believe in terms of an appropriate, maybe a staff action for us to go actually away and look at that to bring that back to the next appropriate committee to understand where that financial spend is part of Chris's reporting through the capital monitoring report.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
If that's okay.
Could we take a staff action on that? Would be excellent.
Yes,
okay.
I'm happy to take that if Chris is happy for the report.
Yep, myself and Eva Lisa are actually meeting this week to talk about that and all of the projects as part of our renewed focus on delivering the transport improvement program over the next 2 years. So that's on the agenda to look at them all, and what you said fits in really nicely with what we're looking to do.
Excellent, because there's $2 million sitting there that we don't want to go back into the giant slush fund. Thank you.
There isn't a slush fund.
Well, the Waka Kotahi funding pool nationally, we want it to go to our projects. Yeah, thanks.
Will this come back to the Infrastructure Operations Committee as part of that spend?
We had the final Infrastructure Operations Committee on the 9th of August.
Right.
And so
we've had the final, okay.
Our council, or it may need to go into the next term. Yeah, as an action, but Chris and I are definitely working on that, and we'll definitely bring that back.
I think Sarah's comment, if I'm reading it right, Sarah, is that you'd like to see where we're at before the end of the triennium, so that at least it's sitting on a report or an agenda for early meetings in the next triennium.
I guess it's obviously ideal, given that there will then be a space of time where probably it will be difficult for staff to get that guidance with the amount of time it takes to get things rolling. So, but just what's possible, ultimately.
So in terms of, there are still conversations to be had regarding the climate emergency response funding package, so we could incorporate that into that, if that's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair Rob. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dave.
Thanks. Maybe a slightly different direction of question, and it's probably through you to General Manager Chris, possibly. Items 53 and 54 on page 19 relating to the Peacock roading contract for 2 different roads there. I wanted to ask if it is necessary to follow the original timeline for that construction, i.e. to go ahead physically with the contracts, because of the drop-off in speed for which Amberfield is being developed. I don't want to say too much here, because I imagine some of it's
NPE.
One of those dreaded public excluded items.
Another one.
But I'm aware that there has been a slowdown there, and so I'm not too worried necessarily about doing construction of transport things ahead of when they're needed. But a long way ahead, I do become a bit worried, because in this case, we require the DCs from developments, from residential developments in this case, to actually repay some of that money or to put it back into the system. And if there's a slowdown in construction there, should we be going ahead with big ticket items that are going to draw money from that via DCs, if I've made sense?
Yep, no, I think we understand. It's the question of timing, isn't it, that you're looking at?
Yeah.
Timing
Not
between
the
doing the
contract,
work,
not the project,
bringing the
just
debt in, and then getting some of it repaid through DCs.
Yeah. Should we be delaying it for a year or?
Andrew, I think you're ready for the...
Yeah, sure. I'll take the question on behalf of Chris. Council resolved to award those contracts last week, following a fairly comprehensive procurement process. I would say, though, that the question is something that's been front and centre in my mind. Part of the contract includes a PDA with developers to try and integrate their timing of their works with the timing of our work. So there is, whilst no one can ever commit a developer to proceeding, there is commercial agreements in place that does tie things together in terms of the actual physical works as best as possible. And the other comment I would make is those two projects are 100% housing infrastructure funded, which means they're interest free. And so one of the benefits of that funding arrangement is it buffers council for 10 years against either accelerations in the market or decelerations in the market, because there's no cost of finance associated with those projects and therefore no cost introduced into the DCs.
All of that begs one question.
Yes.
If we're not receiving any income, it doesn't matter how beneficial the financing arrangements are. We have trouble paying it back in the time frame that we had intended to, and we may even have to take out loans on market force sort of type loans to refund. Because HIF we don't start the repayment after 10 years. We've got to start it straight away, as soon as with it the following year.
Not quite. Oh, so there's, in terms of the loan repayments, there's two separate mechanisms. So the primary mechanism is the loan. The first repayment is deferred for 10 years. So you get a full 10 years interest free on every drawdown under the funding arrangement. The second element of repayment, in the business case, there was a provision to pass through forecast DCs in real time back to Treasury, right? But I can't remember the date. But in the last 4 or 5 weeks, I brought a paper through to council, I think it was. I might have that wrong. It was council or a committee. Well, it was part of the annual plan, actually. So my memory's a bit grey. We've negotiated an amendment to that repayment provision with Treasury. So pretty much almost all of the payments in this 10-year plan period up to 2031, which is about 16.4 million, have all been shifted out substantially, like almost 100% outside of the 10-year plan period, for exactly the reasons you're driving your questions. So the summary of all of that is we have enjoy an interest-free period of 10 years for every single drawdown, and we now have deferred all repayment obligations, all fixed value repayment obligations. I think the first one's now 2028. Don't quote me on that. That's about, it's 2032. I'm told by my accountant 2032, thereabouts. But my point is largely outside of the 10-year plan before the very first payment is made.
So yeah, look, I understand that, and that's good thinking, I guess. Well, don't guess, it is. I'm still a little worried that if the delay in construction at Amberfield continues on, are we in a position to maybe further extend the payments out so that what I'm wanting to see and what we wanted to see at the start was that the DCs and other revenue coming in would come in at the right time. In fact, you were quite meticulous about that, come in at the right time to enable the payments without having to have interest-bearing loans come into play.
Yep, I understand the question. I can't answer the question directly, but all I can say is Treasury have indicated a willingness to be flexible around the repayments through the deferral of $16 million of debt repayment. In terms of the developers, it's not just Amberfield which has been mentioned today, but there are a number of other developers. I think my sense is that one of the one of the things matters developers are waiting for is the cell to be unlocked, which is coming at us imminently. So, you know, in under 12 months, the bridge will be open for use. And so I think there is a sense of pent-up development energy building in that area. I know there's a number of players who are buying pieces of property to consolidate them into larger blocks. There's quite a lot of activity. I don't particularly want to mention names in this committee meeting, but there is a lot of activity. I guess the question is, will that translate into actual development? I don't know. That'll be driven by market, but there is a lot of interest and a lot of acquisitions happening out there at the moment.
Look, thanks for those answers. I'm wondering, Mr Chair, if we could, through you to the General Manager, if the incoming council, there could be a sort of a minute note that the incoming council receives a report on any changed financial circumstances relating to Peacock, the HIF loan, the repayment timing and things like that, these issues that have been canvassed sometime in the first 6 months, I guess, so that it gets updated, and then perhaps our financial papers accordingly get updated as well.
Yeah, look, I'd be happy to move that if it needs moving, but otherwise...
Well, if you're happy with a minute note, because I suspect that this isn't just Amberfield. You know, we've had discussions in this meeting over the last few months about how DCs have dropped off with a more slowing market out there. So it may become a problem not just at Amberfield. It may well be that there are declining DC receipts that will impact on our ability to repay other debt that council has.
I guess it was just that in this circumstance there appeared to me to be potentially an opportunity to slow the spending of the money up, slow the expenditure up to match the changing circumstances.
Of course, the counter to that is the inflationary pressure. But what I would say, I think that's a fantastic suggestion. I would 100% support, and I'll leave it to the chair to decide the mechanism, whether it's a minute. But I
are you comfortable with a minute, Dave?
I am.
Yeah, no.
Because I won't be here to enforce it.
So am I, but it will also involve Tracy and the finance team too, in terms of that monitoring that's being done on the cash flow effect of DCs being received.
I think if I may suggest, perhaps it's an update on benefits realisation that was set out in the business case. So that's your DCs, it's the yield, it's development activity, it's the whole package that was set out in the original business case.
But also the impact on our finances as well.
Yes.
Which wasn't so much in the business plan; it was sort of standalone.
Minute note versus recommendation is what I'm thinking. Just sorry to jump in above other people. I would be happier for it to be more explicitly set out, because one of the things I was going to talk to in the debate is getting the public to understand the risks and such of the major projects we have. So just can you hold that for the decision, and maybe we'll draft something up if other people feel similarly to me.
Okay, all right, we'll do that. Shall we just Dave, have you got any more questions? No. Shall we just move through the questions and then perhaps see what the feeling is of the meeting in terms of whether it's a minute note or a motion? Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Chair. I only have one question because all of my questions have been answered. That's a benefit of going last. Ian, just in regards to inflation, page 20, your commentary is that, Council, in the plan we've adjusted from 3 to 7%. Could you show me where in the report where we're currently sitting for the last couple of months in terms of actual inflationary pressures on cost escalation?
That, firstly, this report deals with the financial year ending 30th of June. The 7% increase or the 4% incremental movement relates to the current financial year. And in terms of your direct question as to this, the report has no mention as to quantifying what may have been inflationary increases on budgets. I know in previous iterations we've reported that there was a movement like in the library contract as a result of inflation, but there's nothing currently in this report that would tell you that information.
Okay, so you've answered, yeah, so there's nothing in the report. I guess I'm asking you, Ian, do you have any information regarding what our current inflationary pressures are?
What I would say is this, is that if there was any significant increase in budgets above what we had approved in the thing, you would see that coming through the changes schedule. And at the moment, we're not requesting any additional funding for that, nor am I aware of any contracts at the moment. And you heard Chris Allen before say that not aware at the moment of any costs that are hitting that are showing significant increases above that. I mean, the current quarter.
Mr. Chair, could I ask Chris Allen, because I swore that I heard him and I wrote a note down that he said currently around 7.1. Was that a figure, or did I mishear that?
No, that is a published figure that's just come out in the last week or so for the quarterly inflation rate. Yeah. It's one of the indices, there's a number. I think I'm picking up the drift of your question, and I think all we can say is that we'll put a focus on it in future reports to council and track where we're heading. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was no trick in my question, Ian. I love how you tried to think that I was going somewhere. I just wanted to know if there was a simple summary somewhere. Clearly there isn't. I'd heard it, staff are aware of it, and all I'm asking is ongoing. Can we just have a figure?
Yeah.
Just to tell us, just to let us know.
Look, fully appreciate that. The last thing I'd say, and it's not a defensive comment, is the other thing is, Chris did make the mention there that the quarterly inflation is running at 7.1%, and that's what you may see. The question is, you now need to take that number and say, how does it relate to when we open the tender envelopes based on what council staff had considered to be a reasonable price, to see what staff thought we were going to be paying versus what the market is now telling us we're going to pay. And so that's where you tend to actually start to find any genuine cost escalation crystallises, and it's in those situations where it's significantly above what staff thought or were expecting that we would come back to committee.
Well, with all due respect, sir, when initially staff put forward this, they were recommending 3%. So I would remind you respectfully that this council chose to escalate it to 7%, and it's clearly 7.1.
Okay. All right, let's move on then to Councillor Kesh.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions relating to some of the project risks, the risky projects. Two of them just quick questions relating to timing. The Gordonton Road corridor, do we know when that power is being relocated or when that project's actually...
I'll answer that one. I have a meeting on Thursday with Well Energy, and that's on top of our list. So yeah, meeting at a general manager level. Two items is service relocations, which is the hold up on that project, and just health and safety issues.
So that will come through to us as an update at some point?
Yep, I could probably undertake, because we're running out of committee meetings, to send an executive update to councillors on that one.
Awesome. And the second one regarding to the one you touched on earlier, Chris, with Rototuna Village. You said that there's another solution being looked at with that drainage issue. Would you know, or would you guess the timeline for that? Or I'm just thinking about, you said that the other bits are opening in May 23, so how would that impact access and usage of the newly built areas in regards to road closures and all of that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think the timing is going to fit very well. So I think everything in May will open up and we'll still have this problem. So I think it's this critical path activity now that we've gone beyond. So unfortunately, all I can say is we're working really hard to try and get that connection made. So the solution is not so much a physical solution, it's an alternative option to try and manage the effects of the NPS freshwater, to still culvert the road, but it might be that there's mitigation required elsewhere to compensate for the culverting. So that we're not looking to necessarily at the moment change the physical solution, it's just how we manage the consenting
so the roads
issue.
would still connect
Yeah,
eventually.
that's still very much our aim
Yeah.
to connect them, yes.
So do we have a plan to manage access to the new facilities once it opens?
Not yet. I think we sort of hadn't run up the white flag on being able to make the connection in time, and that's just looking increasingly unlikely, so we'll need to do that.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kesh. I don't see any further questions on the list at the moment. Just one final one from me, and follows on from Sarah's on the outstanding work in progress at 85 million. And given your notes suggest that the Audit New Zealand are likely to focus on this as part of their financial audit, what's the problem there? Is it a resourcing issue, or is it a matter of across the organisation getting all the people who are affected by the individual spends around the same table, so that finance and whoever else agrees on what goes into the asset ledger is in fact the correct figure and the correct breakdown? Because, you know, while the figure's down from 125, I think, during the year, which is good, it still is pretty high, isn't it?
Councillor Rob, yes, it is still a high number. I can only express my opinion based on my experiences. As I said earlier, I think it needs to be acknowledged that capitalisation of the type of assets we're talking about can be a very complex exercise, and maybe get elected members to appreciate that, you know, when you're capitalising something as simple, what you might think as simple as a road, that to actually capitalise a road, it'll have multiple components, whether it be the curb and channel, the seal, the base course. But then what you're having to do is you're having to acknowledge the values and volumes, taking it back through the asset management system, RAM, validating it that way and getting the sign off there to bring it back to do the transfer. So that's part of the reason why we find ourselves a little bit in there, and a lot of what we've been doing over the last 3 to 6 months, Councillor Pascoe, is looking at those systems, trying to streamline them, trying to understand them, trying to acknowledging that we maybe do have some resourcing issues in play, and trying to fill those and ensure that we are on top of them.
Do you think we overthink what the final result's going to be, when at the end of the day depreciation is really an estimate? Because the next step in the chain is to say how long is it going to last for, and that has an estimated component also. That, you know, if we were able to streamline the process, we might be able to do it in half the time, and still come up with an answer that is not materially different to what we actually end up with.
Again, my opinion would be, if you're looking at purely from the depreciation aspect on the financial statements, on the P&L, we could do that, and, you know, we see that we're able to accommodate a reasonable depreciation allowance through an estimate that Tracy and her team put through on a monthly basis. I think where the complexity comes in, I'm talking about, is understanding that these assets are not just there for the purposes of generating depreciation, that they sell a massive data set in terms of ongoing asset maintenance, operation, ownership, and the asset owners per se need to know exactly what's out there, what they're managing, what they're owning, what they're operating, what they're maintaining on behalf of the city and the ratepayers, and that's where it comes down to that degree of complexity through the asset management system. It's not wrong. I'd think that, again, a little bit more focus, a little bit more attention, a little bit more streamlining, and a little bit more resourcing, and I think we will get there, Councillor Pascoe. I think my honest assessment would be maybe over the last few years we've been a little bit light in terms of giving the right focus onto that. But
I mean, this story goes back to, you know, my first or second year on council, because I know it was a real issue during Mayor Hardacre's time to try and bring the figure back, and that was, the figure wasn't as high, but percent, you know, on a comparative basis it was. So I just wonder if it just needs a look at from a management perspective to see if there are better ways that we can remove this issue that seems to come up year after year.
Could I just comment on that, Chair? Like, this is my accountability, so I'm happy that we are finally moving in the right direction. Ian has mentioned the resourcing up, so Morva we've brought directly under Ian, so one of Ian's top KPIs, but he's got Morva there and she's having a big difference just with focus on that. I think it's a complex issue with multiple arms and legs. One of the other things we're doing is some of our big projects which we're just finishing at the moment, like the State Highway 3 roundabout, Resolution Drive, some parts of the Waikato Expressway, Cobham Drive. Traditionally, they've had a long tail to get capitalisation, so we're really focusing on that. We've got, through our consultancy, external resources engaged to make that slick and quick as well, so we don't get that backlog coming in. Myself and Eva Lisa have raised it at a board level at the Infrastructure Alliance. There's mechanisms going into the new contract that Eva Lisa is putting out to get better at that. So I think there's a whole number of different things that are coming together. So I'm confident that we are making progress, and it won't just be another talk fest. This will be real, and we are making good progress.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't see any further questions, so I'll move that we receive the report, which I think is which is the staff recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Councillor Dave. We're now in debate.
Sorry, we just checked that what's happening with the...
Oh, yes.
So, I wanted to vote... Oh, good. I did ask them to think about... I just want a simple recommendation, not too specific, but that signals to the public that this is a watching matter that we take seriously. Good. Brilliant. I knew somebody would have better words.
We'll add this into you're happy to do that, Dave?
Yeah.
Yep.
You want a second?
I'm happy to move. Well, let's see what the wording is. Yeah.
You've already moved and seconded today.
Blair, have you got some wording there?
No, it's fine. As long as it's in there, Dave. I'm happy. Shall we debate while we're waiting or no?
Well,
oh, you want to see
let's see what the wording is. I guess the first part of it will be that the Finance Committee receives a report, and B will be request staff report to the appropriate committee on the progress to realise benefits from the...
Could we say in the prior to June 30, 2023? Because just in case there's any annual plan implications.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think a date is also important.
Yeah, just June, prior to June.
And I guess another part of my thinking was it's the benefits and the risks that we need to highlight as we go forward. But, maybe I'm being oversensitive that, and I will speak to it in the debate.
Yeah, why don't we put in realised benefits to progress
and any potential risks
and identify as well as identify risks. Is that?
Do you see what I'm trying to achieve there?
Yeah, that's fine through the chair. I think the Peacock's business case really is our overarching fundamental document that everything's anchored off. So happy to include that.
Thank you. So you can put those extra words in for me, and then you guys are happy.
Realised benefits.
Could we put as well as identify risks after realised benefits?
Yeah, realised benefits as well as identify risks.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Are you happy with that, Dave? Yep. Okay. All right, so that we have a motion now on the floor. I'll speak to it first. Thanks, Ian, for your report. And look, I think we're finding the duo of reports that we get now as part of the capital monitoring and then following on from the financial performance really does help us all understand the differences between operations and debt. And look, I really applaud a publication like this. I enjoyed reading it when I was reading the agenda. And I think that, this is a good selling document to go out because, a good many of our residents are concerned about council's debt. And so they should be from time to time because it sits on the back of their properties too. So a document like this is really a good way of focusing back on what we did during the year and what some of the outcomes have been and why the debt has been steadily increasing. So we need we need more of those. I really would like to see the work in progress matter sorted, given that it's been around for a while, but understand that there's a bit more to it than simply capitalising the asset. So that's from me. We have Mayor Paula.
Thank you. I support what you've just said, Rob, but I do think we're coming into really challenging times. We've known that. We talked about it through the annual plan. And we talked about it in the long-term plan when the impacts of COVID first hit us. But we really, we're making best judgments, but we won't know exactly what's coming at us from the longer-term impacts of COVID. And when I looked at the risks with those 10 projects, there's a little bit of me that gets a little bit concerned about how long is that piece of string in terms of impact going forward on our ratepayers? Because I do believe we need to be a little bit more transparent about both what we're delivering and the potential risks for some of our capital program. Because potentially, and you've said this, Councillor Pascoe, Chair Pascoe, in some of your debate, potentially this creates a problem for future councils if we don't quite manage it correctly. And I do have some concern for the contractors that we use in the wider community, because when I go to events like the Civil Construction Awards or House of the Year or whatever it might be, and I'm talking with the community there, I do hear some concerns around their ability to deliver on time and on budget. And I do hear that the general public are reticent to invest in some things like property. Just right now, everybody's sort of watching and holding on, so sales have been a bit slower. So opening up the land, as Blair says, is an amazing opportunity, because it really enables developers to have confidence in their supply that they can deliver. But it's not the only aspect. And while we're even on the news today, there was more disruption between Ukraine and Russia. And we just don't know what that looks like coming forward, but we do know that Ukraine is a major logistics port, well, as is Russia, for materials. We do know that we're not the only country, and we're a very small one, that is going to experience the impact of greater costs, slow supply of materials, not to mention the fact that Australia keeps coming over here and tapping our builders on the shoulder and offering them fantastic incentives to uproot and go to Australia, which is another thing that we have all talked about. So we do need to watch this, and we do need to be up front with the community that we're doing our best to land on a direction, but we must be agile. Is that the word? Agile, flexible, and we must be ready to adjust our spending as needs be. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. Councillor Kesh.
$252 million of capital projects in 1 year. I just want to quickly highlight that and just say, wow, congratulations to the team. That is a huge achievement, especially in a year with COVID challenges. And I don't think, we can look past that figure. I also wanted to just quickly thank you for that look back document. It's brilliant. It's such a good summary of what we've done as a council over the year. Trying to sift through thousands of documents, it's such a good summary, so thank you for that. And I just wanted to quickly also touch on the questioning that I had with Chris regarding the Rototuna village. And just to remind everyone that we've got thousands of residents who are looking forward to that opening of that space, and so we do need to communicate that with the community. to let them know that there might be access issues to use that space when it does open. Thank you.
Thanks, Kish. Councillor Dave.
Thanks. I just want to focus on point B there and agree with the comments that have already been made in relation to that. But I think the truth of development in this city is it's been lumpy for quite a while, sometimes higher than projected, sometimes lower than projected. So in order to meet that sort of challenge, we have to have the ability to be quite flexible and to change our financial forecasting from time to time, to look at our levels of DCs charged, to look at whether they're timed appropriately, and to be able to change that sort of timing quite frequently. And we do have the ability under our policy to change DCs from at any time, in fact, certainly from year to year, and we may need to be prepared to do that if we want to stimulate development to keep up with the expenditure, the capital outlay that's going in, or pull back. I think the other thing is that there's clearly at times a difference between the speed of commercial development and the speed of residential development. I know one of the things this council has kicked off within Future Proof is a study over the next year and a half on future industrial and commercial development. I think that's sort of been a bit overlooked in the recent past. I think that may be faster in the near future than we'd planned for, while residential might be a bit slower in the near future. They're going to change, though, over time. And I think the one thing for sure about our LTP projections in these areas is that they'll be wrong, and we have to actually be quite a lot quicker than we already have been, and we're probably better than most councils in that respect, but we're going to have to continue to be good at that. I'm quite supportive of us developing new land for potential residential and commercial development to a certain point, but not to sink all the costs into that ahead of time, because then we sort of financially can shoot ourselves in the foot. If we get land brought into the city legally, if we have the development plans in place and the expenditure plans ready to go, then by negotiation, discussion with the development community, we can be ready to go, ready to press the trigger, but we don't always need to press the trigger. We may need to delay that a bit. We do need to be in control of the land that we know we're going to need to take up at some stage. And part of our problem over the last few years, we've realised we're not in control of very much of the land we're going to need, which ends up pushing land prices up significantly. So that more control we have, the better, and the more flexible we can be, the better in this area.
Thank you. Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting receiving the report, and I appreciate the amendments that Councillor McPherson have suggested. Look, I have said a couple of times there's a few things I'm really worried about, and I used to sit here and listen to former elected members talk about the dangers of deferrals, and I am reminded yet again how they have simply increased, and I think here we sit today with $146 million worth of deferrals, and we need to be concerned, and staff are right to have to really focus on those. I'm also really concerned about the capitalisation aspects, and I'm glad staff are working on that. I would hope, and I'm pleased that General Manager Allen has suggested that going forward in these 6 weekly updates we'll get a much better indication of what the current inflationary percentage is. You'll recall historically I've raised concerns that staff's initial recommendation of 3% wasn't enough. We landed on 7%. I felt it needed to be slightly higher than that. We're sitting at 7.1. That's a real clear and present danger that we've got to stay on top of. And Councillor McPherson's comments today and the points he's raised over the indication of an early downturn in DCs and the timing of them should also be a real clear warning to us, because we have three sources of revenue, I remind you: our rate take, our fees and charges, and our DCs. And we're already spending more. We're borrowing to cover our day-to-day spending, and we look at our three revenue sources, and those DCs in a small decline is an early warning. We need to be flexible and be a little bit more quick to reduce expenditure, if appropriate, to enable us to cope with that potential revenue decrease. So we have stormy clouds in front of us. We need to be mindful of that going into the next term.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan. No further debate. I will exercise my right of reply. And look, just following on from the comments that have been made, we wrote this capital program for this LTP in good times. And all the indicators have been that the city's growing. The developers were shaking their fists at us and rattling the gates to say, we're ready to go, build the roads, build the bridges, and we will be there. And now, over post-COVID or during COVID, the effects of COVID and international inflation, local inflation, we now are starting to see a slowdown. So I think this motion up there supports a need for us, and I know other words have been used. I don't think anyone's used the word nimble, so I'll use that. We need to be a little nimble to make sure that we can pull back on our expenditure if we feel like we're anticipating that certain events will not happen and we won't get that contribution towards the debt in the form of DCs at the time that it's appropriate for us to do it. And if you go back to pre-GFC, 2007, 2008, we in most of the country got caught in exactly the same, that we had infrastructure in place and no one there doing any development. So there were 3 or 4 years of little activity while the city had high debt and interest to pay on that debt. Got a little bit of a difference here because some of that debt is interest-free, so we have got that. And I'm mindful of the fact that whichever economist you talk to, you're getting a different story about the predictions around inflation. 3% was probably the right start at the beginning of our discussion on the annual plan, but as time progressed through that 6 or 7 month period, we were seeing inflation worldwide and in New Zealand getting to that point where the 7.1 is where it's currently sitting. So whether it's going to go up or go down in future is anyone's guess, but we need to be ready and waiting and able to do what we can do in terms of halting that capital expenditure if the market's not ready for us. So we now go to the vote. Those in favour, we'll have a show of hands. Those in favour of the motion? Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, we'll get Tracy. Are you ready to come up? And we'll perhaps...
Would you like to break or take Tracy's?
Okay, all right. Let's break. Let's break for cake and coffee. Just remember that I did not do the additions of the numbers on the cake. Okay. So let's break until 11:30. If we could be back at 11:30, please. There's so many variables. Yeah, I'm sure. That's all right. We'll get. Let us know we have a quorum. Okay. Thanks, everybody, and a special thanks to Governance for morning tea this morning, and to Amy for her fantastic carrot cake, even though the numbers were incorrectly spaced on the cake. But I have a talk to her afterwards about additions and subtractions, but well done, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to item 8, which is the Financial Performance and Strategy Report, which is to the 30th of June, our end of our financial year. And the mic is yours, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Thanks, Councillor Bunting. All right, so yes, I'm here today to present to you the draft year-ending June 22 financial results. As previously mentioned by the Chair and Ian in his earlier report, these are yet to be audited. So the finance team is currently underway with the annual audit, and we are expecting some changes in these results due to some of our year-end adjustments we still have to do. When the auditors come in, they normally have 1 or 2 audit adjustments as well. So those results will be published with the annual report at the end of the year. So the reason, I'm just going to go through in quite a bit of detail today, and one of the reasons for that is you as a council will be recommending to the incoming council to take on these results as part of that formal annual report. So I thought it was prudent to make sure that you understood what those results are, so you can make that decision really easily. So the overall financial performance for Council for the year ending June 22 basically exceeded all of our expectations, I think, with all of the challenges that we did face this year. As you also heard through Ian's report, we had a very mixed year with the current global economic environment and significant increases in our financial pressures, with the risk both on Council and obviously wider New Zealand. The challenges and tough circumstances that we've been facing with lockdowns, staff shortages, staff attraction and retention, and gathering limits very much affected our events and our visitor destination sites. However, despite all of that, not only did we meet our balancing the books budget, but we also ended the year extremely favourably to budget with our overall accounting result. So I'm just going to talk you through some of those key explanations to help explain and summarise some of those financial results. So if we look at our full statement of revenue and expenses for the year, which is on your page 54, Council generated a surplus of $168.5 million for the year in comparison to a budget of $82.5 million. So the largest variances that are contributing towards this result are our fees and charges, exceeding our budget by $8.8 million. These are offset by some unfavourable variances in our DC revenue and capital revenue. We also received additional funding for our Libraries Partnership Program, our Water Reform Stimulus Program of work, and Waka Kotahi for some public transport infrastructure studies. This revenue offsets a variety of additional costs you can see included in our expenditure, for example in the maintenance costs and our professional fees. The favourable variance in our administration expenses is mainly due to the payment of the theatre grant, which we moved out of this financial year into the next financial year, and that's actually already been paid. Our finance costs for this year were higher than budgeted due to half of our lending being on floating interest rate and the variability of those interest rate costs. So we had budgeted, forgot to write that down. So I think we budgeted for about 3%, for about 1.5%, and it averaged about 3%, but I'll just double check that, sorry. The depreciation, as you heard me all year talk about, is attributable to our evaluations of our asset classes. And in our gains and loss, so again, this is the biggest variance for our accounting result. You'll see that's 2 quite large amounts, remembering these are non-cash. A $40 million gain on our evaluations of our interest rate swaps, and $49 million in our property and plant. That's due to the delay of vesting our assets across to Waka Kotahi. Again, we talked about that in our annual plan, and that's included in next year's budget. You'll also note in the report that we've included information around the difference between what we were forecasting at the last Finance Committee and what the final results are. Forecasting is still a relatively new thing for this organisation, and as mentioned, This has certainly been a complicated year, but this is an area we'll continue to improve on. With that, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Tracy. Questions? Very comprehensively presented, Tracy. Not seeing any questions coming up at all. Yeah, Paula.
In terms of the debt to revenue ratio, do with the, sorry if I didn't hear you here, but has that got to do with the issues we were talking about in the previous item around deferrals and delays to, or is that why?
So there's two parts to that, to the debt ratio. So you will see that we've always been ahead of the debt right from the word go in our long-term plan. So that was very much, I guess, what you'd call the ending balance of the last, last LTP into this new LTP. So it's all about cash. So we were favourable with fees and charges, and we were being favourable with the DC. So we had a lot of extra cash coming in the door than what we had anticipated. And you're quite right. And obviously the cash, which basically is deferrals, is just deferring the cash spend. That also has an implication in that debt space as well.
Okay. Are we expecting that to that trend to carry on, given what we know is coming up this year? I mean, cash is cash, but the capital projects, are we expecting that favourability against budget to remain, or are we expecting to catch up?
You won't, based on compared to LTP, because we've always been favourable right from the word go. That will keep going until we reset and do that LTP, and when we switch all of those graphs. So for the next year, you'll see that stay compared to the LTP budget as favourable. And then when we do the next LTP, we will reset, because that will then dictate what our closing balance will be and our opening balance for that new LTP, and we'll then model all of that through.
With the balancing the books, we didn't put rates up in the last annual plan, but put it onto the debt. So does it have an impact there going forward, do you think, in terms of?
Yes, it does, because even though we met budget for our balancing the books, it was still in deficit. So obviously to fund that, we're using debt to fund that $3 million.
So even though this is favourable, the ability to deal with that deficit is still there, so
absolutely,
that doesn't change.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I don't see any further questions on the board or on the screen. So let's go to the staff recommendation, and that's on page 43. I will move. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Joys of sitting here. Councillor Mark, I think. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Mark. Okay, so speaking in debate, I've already mentioned and wanted to congratulate staff and elected members on how well we managed last year, given all of the disruptions that we had, and the fact that the areas that we weren't on budget with are quite easily explainable to the events that happened during that year with lockdowns and so forth. But to come within, and I haven't worked out the percentages, but to come within $140,000 of our budget is almost close to a miracle. And even though Tracy has said that there may be some further adjustments, those adjustments are probably not likely to be significant. If they were, I'd hope that we're aware of what they might be, and so that's probably where that year is going to rest, and a good legacy for this council to hand over to the new councillors from the 8th of October. So well done, staff, and let's hope that we can stay in close to budget, even better our budget in this current year. Thank you. Further speakers? Not seeing any. I will not take my right of reply this time. I'll move to the vote by show of hands. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tracy. Now I'll move on to the next report, which is the Provisional Non-Financial Service Performance Report. Welcome Julie and Katie. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Chair and Councillors. Today I'm presenting the Provisional Non-Financial Service Performance Report for the 2021-22 year. I'll take the report as read, but noting as the presenters before me that these are provisional results and are yet to be through the audit process. They're also presented as you would expect to see them in the annual report, subject to any finalisation in the wording and commentary from staff as well. Of the 62 service performance measures, 42 have been achieved, 16 have not been achieved, and 4 of which we are still awaiting some data on. 16 of the 16 not achieved, 11 have been impacted in some way due to COVID-19 over the last year, and that has resulted in our non-achievement of those measures. A summary of that can be found on page 14 of the covering report, or it's in full detail in the attached report. I'll take any questions now.
Thank you, Katie. Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. Just 2 questions on some on the service performance measures on 2 levels of service. One on page 106 in terms of the percentage of graffiti removed within 2 working days. I read the reasons why. Are we still experiencing staff shortages in that area? I don't think Calvin's here, is he? But and how long is it going to take us to catch up?
I did actually speak to Calvin in the lift this morning.
Okay, good. I often see him in the lift.
Which is perfectly timed. And he has just recruited an additional member to his team.
Great.
And he is bringing up his response rate. I don't want to be quoted, but I think it was close to 90%. Yeah, 89% was what he achieved the last month. Okay.
All right, that's great, because it certainly anecdotally lines up with complaints that I've had around the place. Second one, on page 107, and this is, and I'm thinking I'm going to ask Julie to note, rather than add a motion, to note this for the next LTP, but in terms of the measure on noise complaints, percentage of noise about excessive noise responded to within 30 minutes, we've achieved it because we've said at least 95%. But I'm really concerned, particularly in a growing city, whether that measure is even accurate. I mean, it's fine to respond, but do we have an outcome at the end for the person making the complaint? So had you had some thoughts about that at this early stage, Julie?
Thank you, Councillor Angela. That's a really good point. So the measure is just to respond.
Yeah.
So you're right, it doesn't talk about resolution.
Yeah.
And so that's most really one of the things we want to look at in the next LTP. So we'll make a note and think about how we can actually look at that measure. In the interim, we might have a chat to Calvin and see what they're actually doing now. So there is often data that we capture as an organisation already, but not necessarily report it through as an LTP measure, but we can make that available.
Yeah, if you, for whoever's sitting around the table next time, can make a note there, because I just don't think as a service to the community that measure's quite tough enough, and I've had my own personal horrendous experience with a party going for 21 hours straight. So we probably, neighbours in my area were complaining, knew my job and were complaining to me as well, and seriously nothing was done. So yeah, I'm keen to have a look at that. So thank you. I think that was all. Yeah.
Thanks, Angela. Councillor Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Julie and Katie, I was just wondering, in terms of the deaths and serious injuries, we've had 2 years, it looks like, in a row now where we haven't met the target of reducing the number of deaths and serious injuries on our transport system. What are we doing to look at that, I guess, to see, I guess, whether our current programme of works is going to actually deliver that goal of 0 deaths by 2028?
Oh, she is here. I was looking out for Evelisa.
through the chair, there was a reporting change in that in terms of Whakakotahi Stake highways are now included in our data. But in terms of your question, what are we doing about it? Through the Infrastructure Operations Committee, there was a request that we actually report on that in terms of what we're doing in response to any of the incidents that are identified through the CAS reporting system and this KPI, so that we can actually see that the investment that council is making is actually having making a difference towards the Vision Zero goal. And that's where the Vision Zero report is reported through Infrastructure Operations to help address and try and give elected members information in that respect.
And with the upcoming long-term plan, will we assess, I guess, how we're tracking in terms of addressing, say, intersections or areas that we know are high risk, and whether by that date we would have been able to have addressed them, or is there a way that we can measure whether we're actually tracking towards that longer term target?
We can track, but it's very subjective to the data that comes through, because often there are multiple aspects as to the reasons behind the statistics that you do see. But it's also about if a mistake is made, that we build things that doesn't cost a life or prevents that life. And so there are a number of avenues in terms of the annual plan, but also the low cost, low risk program that's also approved that allows that faster intervention should it be required.
Okay, thank you. Something to pick up in the next term.
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Dave.
Thanks. Look, I had a couple of questions about the rubbish and recycling side of things, which may need it relates to the issues that we faced with during the COVID lockdown and particularly the staff absence or staff shortage side of it. And it seemed to me, and I'm interested in Eva-Lisa in your comment, I guess, that we didn't have a contingency plan in place, even though we knew the pandemic was causing it from 2020 onwards. The pandemic was causing issues, and we sort of scrambled at one point, and the notice came out, hey, we're dropping in the meantime the food waste collection, which caused you could just drive around and see hundreds of food bins still out there, and the response from staff was, well, we published it on our website, and I've just had that response very recently actually from staff. It seemed like we were making changes after the event, and it's led, I don't know whether it's led, anecdotally it seems to me it's led to a reduction in the use of that service longer term than the actual collection stopped. And I'm just wondering whether there was a pandemic interim plan before we got to the point of needing it, and whether we need to ensure that that's written into future contracts or into the current contract for future years, perhaps is a better way of putting it, since I think it's a 15-year contract from memory, something like that. And so we're going to have problems like that again with the low wages basically that are paid in that field. So how do we make sure that we're not caught in having to, I mean, it's a very good service and it's been acknowledged as very good obviously, but if it's not running, it's not much of a service. And how do we sort of protect against that better in future, which then gets us closer to meeting the targets?
So multiple aspects to your question, Councillor McPherson. In response to the were we prepared, we thought we were prepared, but I believe in terms of understanding the impacts of COVID at the time that it hit and the government restrictions, we were bound by government direction in terms of what could be picked up and what couldn't. And so that direction was set by government, and subsequent to that we have now learnt that that possibly wasn't a good thing to do for us. And so it is around how we now reset that to get the community back into understanding the food scraps and that it is a constant service, and I do believe that we've made some changes post that to prioritise the food scraps over other not so, I guess, smelly. Like food scraps are something that are hard to manage in the home on a weekly collection versus a fortnightly glass bin collection. So it's actually how we prioritise what bins are being collected. I understand it is a national issue for those that do also collect the food scraps. So it is one that as a country with that service, it is something that we're working towards as to understand how to make that better, but absolutely acknowledge the impact that COVID has had on the amazing pickup of our community of that service. But now it's actually how do we bring that back to the levels that we had, and do acknowledge that. And our team are working on what that means and how do we do that.
I see the proportions are good.
Yeah.
In terms of recycling, but the volume is not.
Yes.
It's much less, of that that's collected, it's being done the right way. It's just not enough as being.
Yeah, and this council has set a target in terms of the waste management and minimisation plan as a target. So it is about us getting our operations and communications and engagement to the community as to getting that volume back up again.
One of the things that I saw in here, Eva-Lisa, was the missed collections are running nearly 4 times the target, higher than our target sort of maximum. And I know the complaints that that's almost 400 a month as opposed to 110 a month target. I know that a lot of the complaints that we get as councillors relate to missed collections and things like that, and then not being able to find out what the heck's happening about that.
Yeah, so those missed collections, majority were due to resourcing, and so our contractor was struggling with people to drive the trucks around our city to enable our service. There were similar cities that were in the same position, and I guess there's still headlines about that. So it is about how we actually work with our contractors to make sure that our services are maintained, but also the people who provide those services are looked after.
Yeah, are they being looked after well enough under the contract, or did we sort of force the lowest common denominator via the contract? I'm sort of more mindful of how it works in the bus area, and they've had to significantly increase the wages there to attract more drivers. Is this something that could apply in our rubbish recycling collection field?
And I guess we have an existing contract and a contract door, so it's something that we can work with them to actually understand how we are maintaining those staffing levels. I can't comment whether we can influence that because I don't have the detail behind that, but that's something I can take away and talk to the team as to what we can do to make sure that that service provision is available.
Yeah, I guess
and our people are looked after.
I'm thinking that if it cost a bit more to make sure we had more security of collection, because we were going to support through the contract a higher level of wages, maybe that's something that gets brought back to the next council at annual plan time or LTP time, so we at least know whether your staff believe that they can positively influence that sort of collection issue.
So that is something that we can do because we bring forward an annual report on the service to the Infrastructure Operations Committee or future committee, so that's something that we can include in that report.
Okay, can we make a minute note or something like that that's going to happen to whatever the next committee, infrastructure committee is? I don't know best place to do that, Mr. Chair.
Probably that is, I do recall that we do get that report, don't we?
Yes, we do.
But whether it's got that detail in it.
And whether it's in the right time frame for the annual plan.
For the annual plan, yeah.
Yes, I'm comfortable with providing that level of detail in the next report that that's minuted, yeah.
Do you know when the next report is, Evelise?
So it will be in the next triennium, so it will all be dependent on the schedule once the committee structures are confirmed. So it would be early part of 2023.
And that will be in time for the annual
In time to get something if you want it in the annual plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, good one. Councillor Maxine.
Thanks, Councillor McPherson. Good questions. And just as a follow-up to that, thanks, Evelise, for staying in that seat. The 50% looks 50% looks like we've met and exceeded our target there. It strikes me as being a little underwhelming. And especially in terms of the change that we might want to make in our city and actions around climate change. What do we know, and Councillor McPherson's talked a little bit about some of the barriers that he believes people are facing and some of the anecdotal information that we've had, but what do we actually know about the barriers for people taking up that full rubbish and recycling offering?
So in respect to the result of 50.93 in the previous year, understanding before this new service was put in, we were at about 30%. And so that step change has been quite significant for our city and a really good move in the right direction. Some of the barriers have been reported through the Infrastructure Operations Committee, and some of those are about, during COVID, the reliability of the service, and it is about that consumer and education of your home and your household, and for them to understand the recycling bins, and so that's where the education, what goes in the red bin, what goes in the yellow bin, to ensure that you're maximising that diversion from your landfill bin. And so it is about human choice and behaviour, and it's how we encourage that more, and so that they see the benefits in terms of just investing a little bit more time in that.
And is there a plan or resourced plan to be able to increase that into 2023 and beyond?
Yes. So, so because of the targets that Council has set, we're now moving and we're going back to focusing on waste management and minimisation, and it is not just about the curbside collection, but it's actually maximising, and I guess Mayor Southgate has always asked us about construction waste and heading into those areas, so it's about pulling the whole program together, and we are now moving into those focused areas of that to really make that step change with our teams without the restrictions we had over the last 2 years.
That's excellent. And that will, my assumption is, come through the Environment Committee and be a part of and fall out of the strategy that we've just recently adopted and become one of the significant actions, do you suppose?
Yes, so currently there is a current waste management and minimisation plan that's reported through the Environment Committee in terms of monitoring of the actions. Now with the new climate change strategy, it's about us reviewing our waste management and minimisation plan to make sure that they both complement each other where we head, and that process will start next year.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Maxine. Mayor Paula.
Thank you. I understand we're going to get a further update on contractual issues at some point. But what I wanted to ask is just in terms of, we're in the Finance Committee, but in diverting waste from landfill, right, and the government levies going up, I think the public are unaware of the increasing costs of waste, and I wonder if there's any opportunity to explore that a bit more. We're diverting from landfill, and if we weren't, it would be costing us quite a lot more, right?
Correct.
And I think that goes unnoticed in the community. But so can we look at doing something that talks about that? We also, I'm just question in terms of increased fly tipping, which we see in some pockets pockets of the community in particular. Unfortunately, Dinsdale is one of those pockets that you guys have been working really hard to clean up. What are we finding from that in terms of, are we getting, is that, I mean, that's anecdotal. I know that there's a number of parts of the city where rubbish is dumped behind commercial properties and other places, in gullies and stuff. What do we know about that?
So my operational team aren't here with the detail, but there is in terms of our fly tipping there are specific hotspots around the city, and particularly at particular times of year also, when there's
all the packaging post-Christmas.
Students packaging post-Christmas, Christmas trees, like things like that, and so it is around our team proactively and working with those communities and key stakeholders, which we are proactively working with them, and we know that the charity businesses have a real issue with dumping in front of their shops, which is a big expense on their business when they're trying to do good for the community, and it's how we work with them on that. So, but yeah, there is an increase. Is it a significant increase? I'm not believing it's like a big step change, but we are seeing that gradual increase, and this is where the refuse transfer station and the fees to take them to the refuse transfer station, and particularly the recycling, we try and encourage that, and so that it, but there's always a risk.
Yeah, and so
with that.
I've heard some feedback about that because we don't control the fees at the recycling centre, do we?
We approve the fees, and they are approved for the Infrastructure Operations Committee.
Have they gone up in any way?
There was a percentage increase, yes, but that paper went through the IO committee and was approved.
Okay. And any final question on this, because I wasn't going to go right into waste, but any plans to discuss community recycling hubs that allow people, because the glass bins are a big problem. Yes. I never fill up my glass bin. I don't know how much some people are drinking, but or big flats of students or something, but I never fill up my glass bin. But a number of people do and would like an extra bin, and we don't do that because we can't pick up the extra bin, and we haven't got any other glass recycling drop-offs.
So within the 10-year plan, there is approved funding to look at approved drop-off points, and so that work is in the process on the way to be completed. So there will be information coming back to council on that.
I think it's a communications issue as well.
I now know where to drop off my excess bottles.
My bin, yeah, feel free.
It's free at the refuse transfer station if you have excess.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any further questions. I've just got one, and that is with Audit New Zealand, and I know that there is an issue, a non-financial service issue that has been carried over from previous years. Are we getting any sort of red flags or indicators from Audit New Zealand that they are likely to add to that one in terms of modifying the audit report this year?
So Audit New Zealand have indicated there are 3 areas that they're looking at for this audit of particular focus areas. So the first one is the drinking water standards. And that issue has come about because our drinking water monitoring of it. Priority used to be the DHB, which now no longer does that program. So it is a nationwide issue that the whole of the country is not going to get certification by the DHB, and so that's going to be a bit of an issue. So that'll be one that everyone will get. The second one is water loss. That's a focus measure for them. Because we don't have water meters, our water loss measure has a variance of plus or minus 22%, and that's quite a large number. Audit New Zealand are currently working on what they think will be an acceptable range for a plus or minus variance. We don't know that. We hope it might be above 22, so we'll be okay, but we don't know that yet. And the third one, which is most probably the one that's more topical for most councils, is if we have climate change targets. And so we do have climate change target in our LTP on our council emissions. We just actually had a meeting with Audit New Zealand this morning to discuss that. So this is something they've never had to audit before. So they are going through a lot of training and learning process. In terms of our target and how we're reporting that, we had our initial baseline target audited by external approved auditors for climate change, so we had a good and the right starting point, and post that we have followed the MFE guidance for calculating that. So we should hopefully be in an acceptable place. So those are the only three they've highlighted to us.
Okay, thank you. Right, that's all looking good. Okay, so let's move to the motion, which is on page 73, yep. And I'll move. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Jadine. Is there any debate? No debate? All right, let's put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Against?
The motion is carried unanimously.
All right, we now move on to item 10, which is one where I have declared an interest, and I'll ask Deputy Chair Maxine to take over the chair. She will then lead you through to the resolution to exclude the public, and then we'll consider C9 with me also outside of the room. So, so the chair.
Do you want me to leave that?
Chair is no.
This report, so we're meetings in your hands.
Today is just extending the current PwC contract that we have for our internal audit program of work. So what we're just asking is to extend that for 1 more year, and then we will move into tendering for that contract next financial year. So with that, I'll take the report as read.
Don't see any questions at this point. Just one from me. Sorry, Mayor Paula, I'll just ask my question and then I'll come to you. Just the one question from me is that it leaves a 10-month time frame, as I understand, and if you could just outline the process that we would go through there and before we appoint or look for an alternative. And is that enough time?
Yes, it is. Thank you. So it is just like any normal procurement process that we go through. We would put out the tender to anyone that wanted to take on that piece of work and go through that. So yes, that's plenty of time.
Okay, and the contract sum is adequately inflation adjusted?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. To you, Mayor Paula.
Now I've forgotten what I was going to say. Oh yes, in terms of the contract price, there's not a great deal we can do but to accept a reasonable contract rate, isn't it? I mean, we could go out through a convoluted process to go to the market, I presume, but the costs, in your opinion, are reasonable for the service, and we've used them reliably for some time.
Yes, and I think that in itself is some of our advantage, and the fact that they know the organisation, and we've obviously worked with them for a reasonable period of time, and the work that we're asking, and as you'll know from being on the Strategic Risk and Assurance Committee, the work program is pretty intense for them. So
yeah, I've got no issues with their performance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mangai Jadine.
I'm just checking that we've started looking into the tender process already for the next year, and then coupled with that, my understanding of the internal audit space is generally you can only have a partner or director that stays on that particular client for a certain period of time? So will there also be an expectation that there may need to be a partner or director rotation?
So I'm not aware of that partnership with an internal audit, so there's definitely for external, we definitely change who the partner is and the lead and the manager within our externals, not necessarily for internal audit, so no, I'm not aware of that. As far as the tendering for the next contract, yes, that will be on my to-do list as soon as I leave this meeting.
Excellent. Kia ora.
All right, no other questions from the floor? Let's go then to the recommendation, and I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Paula? I don't need to debate anything from you, Mayor Paula, no? All right, we'll take that through to the vote then. All those in favour, raise your hand. And against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, if we move now to page 150 and the recommendation to move into public excluded. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. A seconder. Councillor Donovan. All those in favour? Right. Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll...
Maxine, can we just have a check on when the break's going to be? Because I've just got to arrange a meeting in that time. Are we breaking now and coming back, or are we breaking somewhat later time?
I understand that it would probably be a good idea